The food service, hospitality, and retail industries are evolving in ways you've never heard of until now. Hosted by global industry technovator Rob Grimes and powered by the IFBTA, Tech Bites is your go-to podcast, putting technology innovation and trends on the menu.
Rob Grimes with the IFBTA, and this is another one of our Tech Bites podcasts with a special guest, not a guest. We're going to just have a conversation today. So it's just a conversation guest who's with me, Maruoko Sam-Agwor, and he is the manager of new restaurant installations at Chipotle. So welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Very nice to be here.
So I'm not going to hold it against you, but I think you are in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio State. Is that what I'm seeing here?
That is correct. Columbus, Ohio, the home of the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Well, I'm a Penn Stater, right? And I'm not feeling too good. I don't know what the problem is here, but, what can I tell you? But a great hospitality school at both places. And I love Columbus, actually, because it seems to be the hub of where a lot of restaurants test both new concepts and technology.
Yeah, you would be correct to say that. We have a lot of good eats, both between smaller organizations and big ones that I'm sure you and a lot of others would know. But we're a little ecosystem here of good eats.
Why do you think that is?
I think we have a good cross section of people, both between age and demographics. A good bit of young professionals, which I think organizations can kind of use that to extrapolate their data and kind of what they're seeing within the restaurants. But I think ultimately we have a good cross section of the U.S. and ultimately the city is always hungry for new food.
They're hungry for new food. Okay, somewhere in there, I think I get that. Right? So, in your current position, what is it that you actually do? Because Chipotle gets a lot of press, and I do recognize that you're not officially representing Chipotle today, but your experiences both also with Wendy's, that you've been in, but what is it that you're responsible for doing for those that don't know you and didn't get the opportunity to talk with you at FS Tech in person?
Absolutely. So yes, on that note, have to say that, as we go through this, my what I chat about today are the thoughts of Maruoko and not necessarily reflect out of Chipotle. But my role at Chipotle is manager of new restaurant installations, and primarily that entails making sure that we open our restaurants as effectively as possible. This year, we're slated to open at least 311 restaurants, which is almost unheard of, right, within the industry, given the amount of velocity and what we're planning on doing year over year. And so my idea is to kind of navigate this, or my role is to kind of navigate this, big, giant machine of an organization and make sure that we're opening restaurants as efficiently as possible from a technology perspective. But also we have an idea on innovation, for the future, so that we are one step ahead, or at least as far ahead as possible in the trends and whatnot that, again, will affect us opening up restaurants.
So before we talk about innovation in Columbus, Ohio, you also, before that, you worked with a cooperative that did small, the supply chain cooperative.
That is correct.
And what was that?
So I was at Wendy's for about 7.5 years, another big organization that has their headquarters here in Columbus, Ohio. Funny enough, I started off as a project manager on the IT side of Wendy's, and then moved over to become a technology buyer on the QSCC side, which stands for the Quality Supply Chain Co-op. And so that was a cooperative built to service only the Wendy's organization, right? We worked out of the same building. Although we were a small company, we had that big company feel because we worked right hand in hand with Wendy's. And so my job at that time was to basically have my eyes over every single technology contract within the business. And so I started as a manager there.
Supporting the franchisees as well as the because a lot of times the co-ops are doing those kinds of things as well. They're put in place to help do that.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Wendy's is, or was at the time, 95% franchisee. And so, the franchisees really, especially from my perspective and being kind of cut my teeth within the co-op, the franchisees are the main drivers within the business. And so, what we did was make sure to champion their voices and champion their thoughts and ideas, and make sure that all of the technology items that we were going to put into the restaurant were rational, made sense, and were also the best of breed. So, really had a good time doing that within Wendy's. And so started off as a manager, ended up getting up to director and leading that team. And I think just the natural progression of how you do things right, started working on other supply chain categories like smallwares and contract services,
Right.
since I did have that technology sector
Now,
under my belt.
that was not your first, role really in technology. So, are
Mhm.
you like a Apple, aficionado here? Are you like totally in the Apple world?
I am. Funny enough, I did work at Apple while I was in the UK, where I did my master's. That's again where I met my wife, and still till this day we watch keynotes together. So I think that could give you an idea of how much we still do enjoy Apple. But as a true technologist and a little bit of a nerd, I certainly appreciate Microsoft and all other platforms as well, because they have their draws and setbacks for sure.
Well, I was going to hold this against you because the you know, when it comes, so I'm not on Apple, although I'm certainly, in favor of it. Um, and so I don't want to be quoted as, one way or the other. I think that people choose technology based upon the use case of
Absolutely.
it. But, personal technologies, so I've got my Samsung Note here, but I've been following Huawei and their new triple.
Yeah.
And I was in Singapore a few weeks ago, and boy, I was trying to see one of those things, right? So
Triple
I'm
folds.
I'm more about the technology that's out there, and I believe that over time, uh, really the operating systems will become transparent and ubiquitous, and we're going to be able to just do anything on any device, and then choose the best hardware, and then choose the environment that you want to work in that's best for whatever it is that you do. But I was telling you the story before we started that at one point. I had a session with somebody to discover that I hadn't hit the start button. And it was all because this podcast is done on an Apple computer, which I don't use day in and day out. And I couldn't figure out which buttons I had to push. So I figured I'd give you a hard time about that.
Oh
But,
no, it's okay.
but anyway, let, yeah, let's go back to the subject of Columbus and sort of being a technology hub. Because I see things that are a technology and restaurant hub, but a lot of people may not be aware it's a retail hub too, with the Limited there.
Absolutely.
And I've been to their offices, and I see a lot of people that move from retail to food service, and actually at one time was a hotel hub as well. Um, and I'm just trying to figure out why there's also so much innovation coming out of there, because I believe that over the last few years, chip manufacturers are now basing themselves in Columbus.
Yep.
You had, I think, White Castle is in Columbus,
That's
and they had Flippy, doing the robotic, burger thing. And when I think about technology innovation in our industry and technology in general, for some reason, it's in Columbus. And by the way, the fact that you started Apple in the UK, when I look at Microsoft's people that came over here to do retail and food service, the technology labs, Microsoft, IBM, all in the UK, and they came over. So why do you think that? Why do you think there's so much industry innovation that comes out of Columbus?
So, as you were kind of going through the question, I think the one word that would stand out to me would be talent. And I don't think that that's what people would relate with Columbus, Ohio, right? We have a lot of talented individuals. I mean, not again just because it's my alma mater, but given that Ohio State is right here and the amount of educated individuals that they pump out and companies in the surrounding areas kind of scoop up, right? I think the talent and also the bang for your buck as far as what you have to or what you would have to pay those individuals. You have a good amount of people that have, technology, financial, management, all sorts of experience. And the fact that we have all of these hubs within the city and folks kind of trade seats, right? It's taking that experience from that one maybe your first job at L Brands, then you went to Wendy's for a little while, and then, maybe you end up at Cameron Mitchell's, right, which is a smaller but
Absolutely. No
emerging.
Cameron Mitchell's and Brio Bravo. And,
Exactly.
there's
And
a
then you
bunch,
end up
right?
at a
Bob
Chipotle.
Evans.
Exactly. And you end up at a Chipotle now, which has been here for 5 or 6 years. And so it's that continuous experience that I think keeps Columbus as a big player in that sense, right? And I think that kind of goes around the talent and how it's kind of preserved within the city.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people do not necessarily think about Columbus as a major restaurant hub, a retail hub, and a technology hub, but it really is a test ground. I think you're right, from the beginning that it's a diverse group, in there, and it just represents all kinds of different types of operations. And a lot of companies, even if they're not headquartered there, use it as a testing ground, for new
Yes.
concepts as well. So that would bring us to a different sort of subject here, because you start to connect the dots. So I'm now connecting some dots here. Okay. So you just made mention of the fact that Chipotle, which I think was in Denver, right? Headquartered in
That's
Denver,
correct.
right?
Hmm.
All of a sudden, 6 years ago, ends up bringing its technology shop to Columbus. Now, we could look at this two ways. We could look at it that I was friends with a former CIO of yours that might have been at Starbucks in Seattle, and now anybody who is an Ohio State grad. So perhaps that might be why. I'm not sure, but I got to think
Hmm.
about that.
Uh-huh.
He was a CIO at Starbucks too. Okay,
Yep.
and that's where I know him as the Ohio State guy. That could be a reason why. It could be because it's a tech hub. Of course, if I start connecting dots, it seems that there's been some other movement recently between your company now and Starbucks the other way. So
Yep.
beats me. I don't think there's actually a discussion in there. It's an observation,
Hmm.
but it's interesting that with the headquarters in Denver, choosing it, is it because of the talent or is it because of Ohio State and the alumni?
You know, I would have to say, honestly, it's probably a bit of both. I would say that, the talent and the fact that Columbus continues to be that emerging kind of environment for the talent that I mentioned before, I think that outweighs it. But any chance for a Buckeye to bring something of this magnitude to Ohio and to Columbus specifically, I'm sure he couldn't pass it up.
Okay, so you must have a lot of peers because you've mentioned about people trading, within the different industries. So you must have peers that are, certainly came from the limited or the retail industries. You certainly have peers that come in from the other restaurant companies. Are there some observations or some hot technology topics that either are being discussed between industries or between the companies? Let's forget about FS Tech here, and I don't want to forget about FS Tech, but let's focus on the region, the conversations that you're having with your peers. What are they talking about as far as tech is concerned within hospitality, food service, retail industries?
I would say the biggest one would be the resurgence of virtualization, restaurant in a box, Uber redundancy with Kubernetes and containerization and those types of things. I would say that would, excuse me, that would probably be one of the most biggest and cutting edge ideas that I'm seeing kicked around today. And what is interesting to me is because there are a lot of concepts that have kicked this idea around in the past, right? It's just coming back. It's almost looking like it's in vogue, but it is also born by different things that we're seeing in the industry as far as folks wanting to have better handle of their data, better security around their financials or security in general, wanting to have more flexibility in the way that you reach your customers, wanting to change your entire commerce and the way that you accept cash, the way that you engage your customers, the way that you serve your food. So there are a lot of different things that actually
You just threw a lot of things out there. Is there somebody that when you go out and you want to check out what they're doing just to see because you think they're sort of leading edge either on the food, the service, the tech, is there some big or small player that you want to give a shout out to that you go regularly and say, God, I got to go see what they're doing, or I need to talk to so and so?
well, firstly, outside of Chipotle,
I knew you were going to say that.
outside of Chipotle, It's kind of all over the place, right? Sweetgreen, I have to give them their shout outs because they're, very similar to what we do. And we have similar ideologies on how we want to reach our customers. Shake Shack from an innovative standpoint and the way that, they have customer throughput. I mean,
And they have a whole investment arm in technology as well. They invest in it as well.
right.
Okay, so
Chick-fil-A.
Shake Shack, Sweetgreen, yep.
Yep, Chick-fil-A and the way that they're kind of championing drive-through. So there are a lot of folks that, and honestly, my wife, she gets annoyed when we go out because I point these things out to her. And I think the last straw was when I pointed out something in Chick-fil-A's drive-through, and she rolled her eyes, and I just said I can't help it. So there are a lot of examples out there. Of folks that are doing really good things that you can adopt either today or in the future.
We probably, bringing up wives for a second here, thank God my wife doesn't listen to the podcast, right? So there's something else about Ohio that a lot of people don't know. And I'm not sure if you know this or not, but it was the birthplace of the cash register because of the NCR Corporation in Dayton, Ohio. And I have some old ones actually down the hall for me here. But a lot of people don't know that our industry technology actually started there. But what used to annoy my wife when I first got into point of sale and I was at Marriott was I would, and I was in charge of global point of sale for them, I would go out to restaurants, and in those days, because of dot matrix printers or silent thermal printers and things like that, I could go into a restaurant and I would call out what POS system they were using without ever actually seeing it. And it used to annoy my whole family, but it used to annoy her that I'm in there like, okay, I bet this one's Romanco, or I bet this one's, NCR 2160, or this one's, they didn't know, or this is a Micros terminal, 473. And I call out the terminal number, by the way, so it's sort of one of those things. So I'm sure you're just as annoying as you're going out and doing those other types of things.
Oh yeah. My wife knows exactly how to call out Aloha given the bouncing, logo.
Very good.
Been there as well. Guilty as charged.
Well, let's just take a break for a minute, and then what I really like to do is talk about some of the technologies that are impacting the industry and what you're seeing on your travels, and we'll compare notes on that. So let's just take a break for a moment. We'll come back and we'll do that.
With the rapid expansion of technology in the food and beverage industries, finding the right supplier can become overwhelming and complicated. To simplify this process, the IFBTA created Exchange. Exchange is a powerful search tool where users can easily narrow down their technology search and refine results by application type, geography served, department, and more. Browse resources and learn more about the industry's technology suppliers at exchange.ifbta.org. Now, back to the show.
So welcome back. And I'm with Maruoko Sam-Agwor, and he is the manager of new restaurant installations for Chipotle. But that's not our conversation today. Our conversation is about tech in the industry. And we finished the whole Columbus thing now. And we've talked about our wives. And I don't know if they're listening or not, but what maybe their tech peeves with us as being people who are very focused on restaurant, food service, retail technology, because that's a very wide industry. But what I'd like to do is, we got to meet at FS Tech. And so why don't we just sort of start there, because there's a lot of tech and innovation going on, and we're at the end of the year, we're going to head out there. So first of all, your observations from seeing tech out. What shows do you go to each year? I mean, where do you go to find tech within our industry or just in general?
Absolutely. So I would say the big ones for me, NRF is a big one, a little more abstract for, food service, but I think that it casts a wide enough net that it gets the juices flowing, right? Understanding what folks are doing in retail outside of hospitality can certainly lend itself to innovative ideas. So NRF would be one.
I hope you went to the Food Service Innovation Zone in NRF last year.
Definitely did. Definitely.
I mean, that's we love NRF because enterprise companies, you can see a lot of things you don't see at the industry specific shows. Yep. Okay, so NRF kicks off the year.
Absolutely. Mertech out in Vegas. I think that's a very good one. A good mix of vendors and buyers as well, or folks within different brands. NRA is also a solid show. more of the actual food and equipment, flavor, but certainly
You're not in supply chain anymore.
exactly. I know.
So what's your favorite food booth there?
Well, what's my favorite food booth there? The Tyson one wasn't so bad. And there also was a seafood, because I'm a huge fan of seafood, a big supplier that, supplied, I don't remember the percentage
It
of,
was Fortune Seafood?
it might have been,
Might be. That's a buddy of mine.
they had the huge procession in the back where they had just tons of sushi. So that was fantastic. So NRA would be a good one, a little more
So wait a minute,
abstract.
I want to point out something. So both of the booths that you mentioned are not on the side of the building where the tech pavilion is.
I get my
Did
steps.
you did you actually you did go to the tech pavilion, I assume,
Oh,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. So again, when I get to these types of shows, I try to cast a wide net, and I try to see everything because I think in speaking with people and just seeing where, because even whether it be equipment, small wares, etc., right, it all has a flavor of technology, right, and you can kind of see where people have different ideas and what they're trying to solve, and conversation also move things forward. So I like having
Well, I
conversations.
don't know what the definition of tech is anyway, right? Because I believe that the IFBTA is probably going to move into agri-tech. As we start getting into more sous vide cooking or 3D printing of
Yeah.
food, which is coming, or vending. That those are not things we're going to see in the tech pavilion. We're going to see those in other areas. So I agree with you 100%. And the very fact that you could go into Ecolab's booth, and I believe Ecolab bought Flippy, right? All of a sudden we're seeing robotic there. You go in the Middleby kitchen, you're seeing the pizza makers and
Oh
tech,
yeah.
so
I
if
mean,
you're
the
not taking a
fryers,
look at
the
that,
ovens, I mean, a lot of things.
it's all connected.
And it all depends on how far or how deep you want to peel the onion, right? Because then you're talking about the technology that could be applied into cooking these, cooking whatever each brand is actually serving, right? So how far or how deep do we, or where is the delineation between, restaurant equipment for food and the point of sale, right? And that again feeds into the experience of the customer, the experience of your employees, because I think folks maybe put that secondary or tertiary as you're solving for technology, forgetting that, human beings need to use these in order to satisfy the customer, right? So there's so much that goes into it, and we can spend a lot of time on
Well, there is a lot there. Okay, so we got to the NRA show. So now we're in May.
it.
Okay, so what else are we doing during the course of the year?
FS Tech.
Okay,
FS
and
Tech.
how about CES?
CES, we haven't necessarily made it there yet, or at least with the idea. That's a little more abstract, and I think that is probably a few years down the line, depending on where we take our customer experience. But
But
I,
if you
I
want to know what the consumer is going to expect,
mhm.
and what they're going to have in their hands, including the mobility, the phones, the interconnected pieces, that's going to be at CES. So I always, by the way, I usually call it a tale of two cities. I start my year at CES, and then 2 weeks later I go to NRF, but they're two different cities. It's Vegas and New York. One is what's coming that we should expect the consumers to demand of us,
Mhm.
and then two is what did the industry learn and what are we bringing out?
That's true. And, I actually have never really thought of CES for what I do, but it makes sense, right? Because it is that cutting edge, and it does have that flavor of not necessarily enterprise, but the consumer, right? What are they looking
Absolutely.
for? What are they yearning for? And that lends itself to, again, where can you meet the customer?
So listen, it's the first week of January. I think it's the 7th to 10th. You can leave there and then go to New York because the 11th is when NRF starts.
Hmm.
And I'm about to book my reservations. We can hang out, so we should take a look at this,
Okay.
because I do identify a lot of tech there that is applicable not only for what we expect the consumer to be asking us to connect to, but also our employees who are certainly part of it. But also when you talk to franchisees, they're always not always complaining about the price of technology or mandates, but as soon as it comes out for the consumer, if we can adopt some of those, price comes down. They're
Mhm.
used to using it, and maybe it's not such a hard sell.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're not wrong at all. And it's something that I'll certainly mull over and start adding into my thinking. And then also I have to figure out how I justify that as a trip. Just the trip to CES seems a little more fun than business, but I'm going to start
It's
working
all
on that.
I'm seriously, it's all business.
No,
And I'm being
I'm just
serious
joking.
because no, a whole room of autonomous vehicles, but some of those autonomous vehicles are delivery vehicles. They're showing grocery, hot, cold drones.
Yep.
Actually, even some of the smallest things can make a difference. And if you want to save the company money, that's one way to do it by looking at how can we use those technologies and then put the applications and things on them.
Absolutely.
I'll help you
Absolutely.
cost justify that one. So FS Tech, was there anything that stood out at FS Tech this year? Because just a couple months ago that you sort of said, "Oh wow, I wasn't expecting that," and it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
So, I think the entire conversation around buy versus build was very powerful. And the conversation around where innovation is going, and with that futurist, Mark, I forget his last name, but I think, just that flavor of conversation and how both folks from the brand side and from the vendor side were really ingrained in that conversation, and it seemed to be a theme for a lot of different brands as well.
So
So I
what
would
did
say,
you come away with? What was your impression then of a buy versus build, just in general? Is there a general theme there? And then what did the futurists say that sort of piqued your, hey, maybe I need to think about that, or the industry needs to think about that?
so my thought is that it's certainly provoking on both sides, right? And it's really interesting where different brands will land, because there are a lot of ways that it can go, right? Do you build 100%? Do you buy 100%? And what happens with the flavor of either? And then as you go through that journey, right, what happens to your teams? How do you align on what actually you want to buy, what you want to build? How do you take that to market?
Right.
All of those different things. And so, those are the types of ideas and, things that it got me to think of. Now, specifically what the futurist, what I keep forgetting his name, but what Mark had mentioned, and what I think is the most interesting going forward is moving away from apps to agents, right? And that was kind of what he was talking about from the
Well, it's
consumer
about
side.
personalization too, right? They
Exactly.
want customer service, and as the bots and artificial intelligence can, any kind of voice AI and can actually start to respond and almost be human in a conversation. Sooner or later, we won't have to do this, but you
Yep.
know, um, that lends itself to more of the bots being able to deliver products and services or understand what somebody wants.
Exactly. And how does that then integrate into all of these different avenues, right? Let's take self-driving cars, or cars in general, right? I've seen years ago, right, there are applications, and there's certain cars where you can order food from your dashboard.
Absolutely,
And so if we're moving away from, just an app and almost to that concierge, right? Or that one app that does everything for you. How do you plug that into the rest of your life, into the rest of, your life and the different
it is. It's a
avenues?
personal concierge.
And then how does the brand, or your brand, or brands in general, tap
Right.
into that to feed
So that
their
probably lends
messaging?
itself to not necessarily building everything, because you're more apt to be able to integrate. If
Mhm.
you're using some sort of standard applications, especially, by the way, I'll go back to it, consumer applications
Yep.
that can be adapted, because that's where your voice is going to come in. That's where those things are going to come out, and then
Yeah,
we use them.
exactly. And so that's why it's a very I think it's a very delicate conversation that each brand has to have, because there are a lot of different levers that you have to pull, and there's a lot of consensus that needs to be built, and there's a lot of planning that needs to go along with it as well, in order to understand the opportunities as well as pitfalls in moving in either direction.
So do you think that do you have any concerns about how technology is going to move in the next 2 to 3 years? The personalization is a big piece, but I know people are concerned. Where I get concerned is not losing our culture and our voice of what makes Chipotle different than Wendy's or makes it different than the Limited. How do you keep your human side, so to speak, in there of what makes you different in service, in delivery, and how you communicate with your guests? What makes Chick-fil-A different than McDonald's? So are you concerned about this, or you just think that it's just going to come around and people just are, they always get scared at first, but then they assimilate?
Well, I would say, and it's funny, it goes full circle, right? I think it goes back to what I said in the beginning, in a sense that a lot of the things we're talking about now, we've already talked about before. And so
Deja vu.
exactly, it's just a different flavor. And so, your question is important because as we innovate, it is it is paramount, it is very important to hold on to the soul of your organization, right? How do we differentiate a Chipotle from a Chick-fil-A to a Wendy's when we're all having an arms race on technology, but also want to keep what our special sauce is, right? And that is to listen to your people, right? Listen to your people, allow for there to be space for people to express their ideas. Hey, I'm excited about this, but this is what I think it's going to deliver, both in a positive and negative, and allow the time for these teams to actually hash these things out. That's what I think, because, folks will have that grand idea, whether it be good or bad, but I think we really need to, or what I have seen and in conversations, we really need to allow enough time for the people who are going to do the work, the people that are going to collaborate to make it real, get their ducks in a row.
So if you think, towards, what do you think is going to, so first of all, the deja vu thing, when people talk to me about, I don't know, data analytics, or, I'll sit there and go, big data. Then they talk about AI. Then and I go, well, rules-based processing. It's like, this has been out there before. It's just a new way of saying it, and maybe it's a little bit more slick, and maybe it's going to work this time because there's certainly a lot of failures out there. But as you look to next year,
Yep.
so what do you think is going to be, starting in January at NRF? What do you think is going to be the buzzword next year, or the buzz subject? Because we know AI certainly was this past year.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to. I don't know per se, but I guess the first thing that pops in my head is, since crypto is the hottest thing out right now, maybe some way to incorporate that into what we do. But apart from
People
that,
tried. They tried doing the payments. It didn't take the first time, but maybe that's one that was before its time. It comes back around, right?
exactly. So it would maybe be that, RFID really taking shape, as far as, again, just ease for your employees and making sure that your supply chain is as strong as possible. I would say that those are probably the two things. Apart from that, AI is going to continue to rumble on. And then actually the other one is maybe more innovative ways that organizations will look to handle their data. That's another one that I think.
Are we talking about how they're going to handle their data from a data security thing, or are we talking about how they're going to handle their data for the use? What the output is? What are we
Data
talking about here?
security, ownership, and governance.
Okay, and you believe that operations, including, by the way, the franchise community, and the big and small operations, the independent, the SMBs, you think they all now have really got an understanding of that?
I, d- I think, again, I don't want to discredit anyone, and I think that most folks do have a handle on their data. Now it's, how far do you want to take that ownership, right? How far do you want to really how far do you want to be ingrained in your data? That's kind of the way that I would.
And people, there is this, and this would be a whole podcast in itself, but there is this discussion of people owning their own data,
Yes.
which, because, you sign those little checkbox that you never read all the stuff, and you're basically allowing somebody to use your ratings and your comments and stuff forever.
Yep.
And people in companies also, are looking to take back their data. So,
Yep.
Well, look, we covered an awful lot of subjects here. And clearly, you are very ingrained and focused on technology in general in there. So personally, on your personal technology, I'm always curious, the holidays are coming up, is there one thing that's either out there or about to be out there that you either wish is on your wish list? And by the way, maybe I'll get your wife to listen to this if you want to do that, get the family. But is there something that you just really is on your technology wish list, for your, personal use?
For my personal, so I would say two things, if I could. The first one would be the new Remarkable tablet. So I'm a big note taker, and I have the Remarkable, and I see that they have a colored one, a newer version coming up, and I really would love
Okay.
that. And the other would be an OLED TV, right? A big sized television.
And why are we not going to CES?
Like
Seriously.
I said,
Let me
I'm
tell
trying to
you.
figure out how to justify it.
Well, I can justify it for you because I'm going to hang out with you. And here's why. What I've learned is that to walk CES and get free stuff, you got to be an influencer. Now, obviously, I'm not an influencer, but so I know we're not supposed to be promoting Chipotle here, but if you're walking around with an IFBTA name tag or a Chipotle one, let me tell you, they're going to be handing you technology to use, and then you're going to just sort of say, can I have two?
Well, you're making a very good case. So we certainly need to stay in touch, and I'll let you know if I do make that reservation.
Okay. So first, okay. So what a great way to end, because one thing I've noticed in this conversation is you certainly either just love this industry so much or you've learned a lot. So you've concluded with the word reservation. Okay, I get that. You used peel back the onion. I wasn't taking notes here, but I'm just noticing this. Somewhere early on, I think you used something like the word delicious or something in there, but you certainly got it right. But what should I expect anyway from somebody who started their career with Apple? So I get that.
You just me personally, a friendly, tenacious, attention to detailed individual that's always willing to learn and build bridges. That's certainly it, and that's gotten me to where I am
and
today.
Yet, for all the technology you're doing, you haven't updated your LinkedIn profile.
Hey, just had a baby, well, not just had a baby, but more recent. And, I would say that I'm living more in real life. And so,
there you go.
And so I do need to definitely get to that, and we'll do by the end of the year. But, real life has been very interesting.
Well, very good. And congratulations on the baby. Boy or girl?
Girl, little me.
A girl. There you go. Well, congratulations. Listen, it has been a real pleasure. And I hope we get to do this actually in person a number of times.
Absolutely.
And, NRF would be a good place to do it if we don't do CES first, but certainly NRF.
Yeah.
So, I've been joined by Maruoko Sam-Agwor with Chipotle Restaurants, who's the manager of new restaurant installations. And I can see this is going to be the start of many great conversations. So thank you so much for joining us on Tech Bites.
Absolutely.
today.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by the International Food and Beverage Technology Association. The IFBTA is the industry's voice of food service, hospitality, and retail technology, providing thought leadership as your single, impartial, and go-to resource. The IFBTA offers in-person and online communities to connect with your peers, the exchange, an all-encompassing global technology resource, and an industry-wide professional education and certification program. The bottom line is the IFBTA is your place to gather, learn, and share in conversations like the one we're having today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tech Bites, powered by the IFBTA. I'm Rob Grimes, your host, and I look forward to taking our next bite of technology together.